Welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Gisela K, and today I want to offer you a visual presentation as a summary of the opening statements in Chad Daybell's trial, particularly because the audio was quite bad, and I found that the opening statements were a little bit underwhelming until I did this. And I'm like, oh, they actually did say all the things. It was just very difficult to hear yesterday. Of course, the cameras are being controlled by Judge Stephen Boyce. It's not media companies that are in there like usual, but thankfully, at least we can see what's going on in the trial versus what happened in Lori Vallow trial, which was just audio only. So, yeah, I'm grateful for that. I'm sure you are too. But here and there, I think a summary like this might be helpful. If you do like this sort of thing, or you like the way that I cover true crime, please like and share and consider subscribing and becoming part of this community. Okay, so let's get started with the presentation.
Please note that this content is for adults only. Viewer discretion advised. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, like, and share.
If you were at the live stream with me yesterday where we watched the opening statements together, you can skip to the next timestamp. I'll put the time on the screen for you so that you don't have to watch all of this again of exactly who's who in the trial, who are the prosecutors, who's the judge, all of that. And then we'll carry on from there. But if you weren't there, you might find this interesting. So Chad Daybell's trial, jury selection started on April 1st and concluded on Monday, April 8th of 2024. There are 10 men and 8 women on the jury, which is the same as in Lori's trial. She also had 10 men and 8 women on that jury. So that's quite interesting. Lori's trial also started with opening statements on April 10th. So exactly 1 year later, Chad's trial started. Hers was, of course, in 2023. This is a death penalty trial, and the trial is expected to last 8 to 10 weeks, which is a very long time, but it makes sense because there'll be 2 phases of the trial, of course, to then later decide if the jury, will vote for the death penalty or not if Chad Daybell is found guilty. So the judge is Stephen Boyce. It's the same judge that presided over Lori's trial on July 31st of 2023 when he sentenced Lori to consecutive life sentences without parole. He said, "You justified all of this by going down a bizarre rabbit hole, and clearly you are still down there." If you didn't see her speech at sentencing, oh man, if you want to get annoyed, go watch that, okay? You'll get real snarky very quickly. So just some differences between Chad Daybell's trial and Lori Vallow trial. Lori's 50 years old now. Chad's 55 now. So Chad is being charged with first-degree murder, 3 counts, right, for J.J. Vallow's murder, Tylee, Ryan, and Tammy Daybell, his wife, and then 3 charges of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of insurance fraud, and also grand theft. Lori was facing first-degree murder charges for her 2 children's murders, and then conspiracy to commit murder for Tammy Daybell, and then additional conspiracy to commit murder charges, and then also grand theft. And she'll have another trial in Arizona to face the consequences of her brother, Alex Cox, shooting her 4th husband to death. The brother is also deceased. If you don't know anything about this case, I would highly recommend checking out the playlist that I've linked in the description box for you because it's so complex, like seeing who's who and what happened. I mean, it's a very busy mind map. We've done that before, so if you check out part 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the deep dive, which we did before either of these trials ever started, you might find that interesting, just to see who's who, who's testifying, how are they related to these people. Of course, Chad and Lori were going to have their trials together, but they eventually got severed. Of course, Lori Vallow Daybell did not. She was going to initially be facing the death penalty, but that was taken off the table shortly before her trial started because otherwise, based on new DNA evidence at the time and just things happening with preparation for her trial, it would have delayed it way too much. So part of the agreement then was to take the death penalty off the trial. In case you're wondering, why is Chad facing the death penalty and she didn't? So Lori was sentenced to consecutive life sentences without parole respectively, for the murder of Tylee, the murder of JJ, and the conspiracy to commit murder for Tammy Daybell's death, in addition to fines and restitution for the grand theft charges. The victims in this case are Tammy Daybell. She was only 49 years old when she was asphyxiated, is what the medical examiners were saying, on October 19th of 2019. Initially, they thought she died from natural causes because that's also what her husband had told everyone. But then they actually exhumed her body and found that, nope, this was homicide. And so I think it's going to be very interesting in Chad Daybell's trial to hear more details about what really happened to Tammy. And was it really only Chad involved? Could Alex Cox have been there? Could anyone else have been there? What exactly? I think there's going to be more data, Google searches, cell phone pings, and things like that that come into play in this trial. And then JJ Vallow was only 7 years old. He died on September 23rd of 2019, and they actually said smothering, not asphyxiated. Tylee Ryan was 16, and she died on September 9th of 2019. They do not know exactly how she was murdered, but she was her remains were dismembered and burned, which is just unbelievable what Chad and Lori got up to with their belief systems, and seeming like they used Alex Cox, her brother, as kind of like the hitman. It's really terrible. So some of the victims' families are, of course, in the courtroom. So I can only imagine, how difficult this must be to go through it all again, because they were there at the first trial and now they got to go through it all again. So sending them lots of love and energy as well, because I'm sure it's going to be quite draining, right? So the prosecution team includes Lindsay Blake, who was actually the one to deliver the opening statements in Lori's trial, and also Rob Wood, who delivered the closing arguments in Lori's trial. This time it was Rob Wood who delivered the opening statements, which I initially just felt it was a little bit, it just seemed to fall a little bit flat. It wasn't as compelling as we thought it would be. It definitely wasn't dramatic or anything like that. It was very calm, and he presented it as chapters, which we are going to go over now, which was quite interesting actually, with Chad Daybell having been an author. So I guess it would be pretty smart to be like, he's an author. Okay, chapter 1 of this case. And then there's Ingrid Beatty and Rocky Wixom as well on the prosecution team. So maybe Lindsay Blake will deliver the closing arguments in this trial. We will see. The defense attorney is John Pryor. He has been Chad's attorney since May of 2021. He has solely represented him since then, and he attended every day of Lori's trial. In a recent motion, John Pryor argued that he wanted to stay on the case, but he needed to withdraw because he was not a death penalty qualified attorney, did not have enough time to prepare for the trial, and that Daybell could no longer afford to pay him. The judge denied that motion and said, "You're staying on the case." Okay, so this trial is going to have no more delays. Here we go. Now, due to an interview that he then conducted with the media about 2 weeks ago at the time of this recording, there's now a gag order in place. The trial days will run from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. with morning and afternoon breaks. Of course, there's a lunch break as well, but the morning and afternoon breaks, they're usually about 15 or 20 minutes or so. There's 10 men, 8 women. They get $10 a day, and after 5 days, then it starts becoming a rate of $40 a day, and the travel costs are reimbursed. So jurors are allowed to take notes. For some of you might think, well, obviously, aren't they always? Nope. In some trials that we watched together, the jurors were not allowed to take notes. Chad Daybell is directly facing the jury, so the courtroom, the layout is a little bit different this time compared to Lori's. And so, yeah, they say he's looking down quite a lot of the time when they're reading, especially when they read the amended indictment and things like that. The prosecutors are facing the judge, and former jurors from Lori Vallow's trial are actually attending this trial. So I find that very interesting as well, that after that, of course, they would know, this case is so complex. Let's hear the other side. Let's hear more. So now let's go over the state's opening statements. This was delivered by Rob Wood, and it lasted 20 to 22 minutes. The reason I don't have an exact accurate time is because he had a little bit of a mic issue, just after he started. So there was a little bit of a delay there. So 20 to 22 minutes, which is not that long. We've obviously seen much longer opening statements, sometimes 90 minutes or 2 hours, sometimes 10 minutes. So this one, 20 to 22 minutes. Now, what he started with was 2 dead children buried in the defendant's backyard. I think that's important as an opening statement to say, I mean, that's very compelling evidence as well. Like, there were children buried in his backyard. And I mean, as I say, he's directly facing the jury, so they'd be looking at him probably as well. The next month, his wife was found dead in their marital bed. So that timeline, it's just 1 month later. I think that's important as well to highlight. Then he says, 17 days after the death of his wife, Tammy Daybell, this defendant was photographed laughing and dancing on a beach in Hawaii at his wedding to Lori Vallow, a woman who is his mistress, or was his mistress at the time, and the mother to the children buried in the graves on his property. He made sure that no person and no law would stand in his way. As you can see, I'm giving you bullet points. It's not an entire transcript of what he's saying. It's just the most important points that I found when I re-listened to all of it. And I'm like, whoa, I wonder if anyone else missed some of this. Because some of these things that he's saying here are very impactful. And I'm sure the jury can hear it a lot better than us with the audio quality with the streaming. So I just wanted to go over this again. And so that you could see it like this. And we just read it, sentence by sentence like this with what I picked out. Because don't you think that's such a clever way to start? I mean, they're going to be looking directly at Chad like, wait, what? And I mean, of course, Chad went on to marry Lori, which he gets to. It's just like, oh, it's his mistress, okay, and then he marries her, but there's her children buried in his backyard. And he actually said it multiple times. Psychologists often will tell you that people listen, they only hear you the 7th time when you're telling them something. So I think he touched on this almost 7 times, just reiterating those points, that the children are buried in his backyard. This was his mistress, and he married her 17 days after his wife was murdered. I mean, wow. Okay, so this is what he said as well. He said his desire for sex, money, and power. Okay, that's how he worded it. Obviously, the rest of the sentence would be led to him taking these actions. But I'm just filling in the blanks there. But the reason I highlighted that is because he said sex, money, and power, whereas for Lori, the state said money, power, and sex. And I do think that's interesting to put them in different orders, and I think it's pretty accurate. I think Chad was chasing his storm. And then the secondary gain for him would have been money, because Lori was claiming on all the social security benefits and trying to claim on life insurance policies and things like that. Of course, Chad also claimed almost $500,000 from Tammy Daybell's life insurance. But don't you think that's interesting that for him it's sex, then money, then power. For her, it's money, then power, then sex. That makes sense to me. So they also said he was an author who wrote books about the apocalypse, which we've looked at before. Also, if you missed those trial prep type episodes, do check them out. They are on the playlist as well. Now, the state very cleverly went chapter 1. So after saying he was an author who wrote books about the apocalypse, he said chapter 1, a seemingly ordinary man. So Chad, seemingly average, ordinary guy. Then he says, you'll see that he craved significance. He worked in journalism. He worked as a sexton. Then he clarifies, in a graveyard. In case, people don't know what it is. I mean, he literally was a grave digger for almost 20 years. And then to pair that with what you've just heard of, and the children were buried in his backyard. You see, the dots are connecting. So they said, then they described Tammy and Chad's relationship, how they met and when they got married and all of that. Then chapter 2, Lori Vallow was a homemaker from Arizona. He described her short-lived relationships and, all the marriages, because she's been married 5 times. And hubby number 4 was shot by her brother. Hubby number 3 was once upon a time tased by her brother, Alex Cox, but eventually died from a heart attack. I know there's still questions about his death as well. There's just so much to this story. But they said then on October 26th of 2018, that's when Chad and Lori met at a religious conference. Both were married and both began having an affair. His thirst for sex, power, and money started, taking over. He wrote about James and Elena, these characters that he made other names for him and Lori. And if you don't know why I laugh like that, wait till you actually hear the story of James and Elena. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to ever read that story to you. That Chad wrote. I've read it a few times. It's pretty gross. But, just how much he desired her and all of that stuff. But anyway, he wrote the story about James and Elena. There were also text messages that they alluded to that they said the jury's going to hear about. Shame, shame. Poor, poor jury. It's a story of lust, and they planned for a future together. Chad was captivated by her appearance and said that Lori was out of his league. Okay, well, clearly they were perfect for each other, but also the worst match ever. Chad's obsession with Lori is rooted in her admiration of him. So she love-bombed him and charmed the crap out of him, and he loved it. So he called her an exalted goddess and said that she had returned to Earth for a special mission, which of course included being with him. Duh. The thing is, though, that he also told other women that he was, talking, if they liked his books or they wrote books or they had near-death experiences, he's like, hey, you and I were together in past lives. That's kind of his pickup line that we've discovered along the way in this case. Like, hey, so you and I were together before. We were married. We were one. I mean, he claims that him and Lori were married, 11 times or something like that. Several times on this planet. Other times on other planets. It's a lot of make-believe stuff there. So they also said that then they would be free from obstacles. And those obstacles were Tylee, JJ, and Tammy. And you know what I worry about? More obstacles. I think that if they were able to continue on the path they were on, there would have been many more obstacles that were taken out of their way. Someone asked yesterday in the live stream chat, why are they not classified as serial killers? And it is a good question. Especially Lori Vallow, but she kind of gets people to do things for her. So I guess that's why. And we don't know yet. I don't know if we will know who exactly murdered the kids. So if it was Chad and Alex, well, yeah, there's a time, a cool-off period, one could say, between the children's deaths and Tammy's deaths. And then we don't know if Chad it sounded like he was inspiring Charles Vallow's death. So it's a lot. I understand why someone asked that question as well. Chapter 3, they labeled those who stood in the way of their dream dark. So anyone who, I just say cockblocked them, I know people are like, what are you saying? Got in the way of their happy time, especially sometimes they had happy time in a imaginary portal in the closet when they couldn't physically be together. That's just so weird. Anyway, anyone who stood in their way, they labeled them as dark, sometimes saying they were possessed by spirits, like Charles Vallow saying that he was possessed by a spirit called Ned Schneider. If you've never seen the body cam of when he actually called the police, and so she's like out of her mind, she's lost her mind, he's worried for her, he's worried for his life, the kid's life. I mean, he saw the red flags, he told the police, he did everything right, and he was still murdered by Lori Vallow's brother. My goodness. But yes, and they also said that Tammy Daybell was possessed by a spirit named Viola. So, but anyone who was in their way, they just wanted to be the two of them on a beach, clearly in Hawaii, just on honeymoon forever and ever, okay? So anyone who stood in the way of that, they were just dark, and they were either possessed by spirits or they were actual zombies. Now, this was a good sentence that the prosecutor said, a convenient narrative that dehumanized people who stood in their way. This narrative gave them the pretext to remove people from this world for their own good. They preached about casting, burning, and death to deal with dark spirits. Then they talked about, of course, Tylee, her remains being found burned. So when they worded like that they were always preaching about these casting out these spirits, casting them out, burning them, killing people if they couldn't, get the spirits out. Wow. And then when you bring in the actual evidence of the remains they found, yeah, it goes in line with that. So they said, enter Alex Cox, Lori's devoted brother. Manipulated by Chad and Lori with promises of spiritual rewards. We've before listened to from Lori's trial the blessing that Chad gave to Alex Cox. If you've never listened to it, it is there on the playlist. Oh my goodness. And it sounded like Alex was really affected by this, like emotionally. He really took it in. It did sound like he was manipulated by these two. Let me know what you think. So they said, Chad literally said to Alex, you have already assisted us in ways that cannot be repaid. And that was after the children's deaths. Alex died on December 12th of 2019. He dropped dead. He had blood clots in his lungs, is what they say, but died of natural causes, which I know there's also a lot of questions about that. But shortly before, apparently the day before, he expressed fear to his wife, Zulema Pastines, that he was going to be Chad and Lori's fall guy. He also left a duffel bag with cash in, things like that. So he was worried that they're going to take him out, and then he just dropped dead. So make of that what you will. Chapter 4, once their calculated plan was devised, it took only months to execute or remove perceived obstacles. Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex Cox in Arizona. Tylee Ryan was last seen on September 8th of 2019. They said her remains, charred and dismembered, were found in a grave on Chad Daybell's property. Lori continued to illegally receive her Social Security benefits. J.J. Vallow. They said later his bound body was discovered buried in Chad's backyard. His death was by suffocation. Lori continued to illegally receive JJ's Social Security benefit. Tammy Daybell, shot at attempted murder on October 9th of 2019, and she died in her own home on October 19th of 2019 with her husband present. And then they talked about the life insurance and all of that. So even though the defense might say that Chad was not involved at all in any way with Charles Vallow's murder, there are phone calls that were recorded of Chad calling funeral homes, pretending to be Charles Vallow's uncle, asking for the death certificate because, of course, they want the life insurance. Lori then finding out the life insurance actually is no longer going to her. And then her telling Chad, don't worry, I'm still going to get the Social Security benefits, that the children were getting for the loss of their dads. Well, the loss of Charles Vallow, and then before that, Joe Ryan passing away. So, Chad immediately after Tammy had died, right, and he got the life insurance, which was almost $500,000, he immediately started looking for condos in Hawaii with Lori. And in the applications, he said, no children. They don't have any children. So, Chad predicted multiple times that Tammy would die an early death. We've discussed that before as well. So, I don't know if he really believed it, in his, zombie apocalypse type mindset, or if that's premeditated. I think the latter. Chapter 5. Chad and Lori got married in Kauai, Hawaii, 17 days after his wife's death. 17 days after, and I'm so glad the prosecutor said, but they prepared for this wedding well before Tammy's death, buying rings, we know about the malachite rings and things like that. So that's premeditated. Now, without the earthly obstacles of spouses and children, and with Tammy's life insurance and the children's Social Security funds, they could live the life that Chad and Lori wanted. Nothing was going to stand in their way. Again, well said, and a good repeat of information. I find there's quite a bit of repeat here, but it will really help the jury to hear all of this and piece it together. Especially, opening statements should be very impactful. As we've seen, sometimes it can be very dramatic, very compelling. Sometimes the delivery is a little more flat, but I actually find that what was said, the content of what was said, was actually very good. Let me know what you think. So they said, unfortunately for this defendant, reality soon shattered their bliss. Two things led law enforcement to them. The attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. Lori's facing charges for that. That was on October 2nd of 2019. And law enforcement looking for Alex Cox and Tylee's Jeep. And then J.J. Vallow's grandmother asking the police for a welfare check at Lori's apartment because she had no idea where her grandson was. On November 26th of 2019, Chad told police he didn't know Lori very well, even though they were married and already speaking for about a year. Lori lied about JJ and Tylee's whereabouts. There was this unique text message they brought up, which I'm sure the jury will hear a lot more about, which was on September 9th of 2019, which was the day after Tylee Ryan's last known appearance. And it was all about Chad saying that he texted Tammy Daybell and said that he shot a raccoon and buried the raccoon in the pet cemetery, and that he had made a fire in the backyard and was burning limbs. Well, when the police went to eventually dig in his backyard, they found the charred remains, not of a raccoon, of Tylee, and close by, JJ's remains. Law enforcement, as I said, didn't find a raccoon. Yes, okay, and the prosecutor then recapped the timeline. Now, he goes from chapter 6. I don't know if he just didn't verbalize chapter 7 and 8. The next chapter we hear is 9. So, shall we consider the next bullet points chapter 7 and 8? I'm a little pedantic like that. Where's chapter 7 and 8? Go listen again and let me know if I got it wrong. Because I listened and I'm like, but where's chapter 7 and 8? Anyway, so they said on October 26th of 2018, Lori and Chad meet in St. George, Utah. See, he's going over it again. July 11th of 2019, Charles Vallow was shot and killed by Alex Cox. Between August 31st and September 1st of 2019, Lori, Alex, Tylee, and JJ moved to Rexburg, Idaho. Tylee was last seen September 8th of 2019. The raccoon text was sent to Tammy on September 9th of 2019. October 2nd of 2019, attempted murder of Brandon Boudreaux. October 9th of 2019, attempted murder of Tammy Daybell. October 19th of 2019, Tammy died. 17 days later, Chad and Lori married. When you put it like that, you can just see how things just escalated so quickly after Charles Vallow was murdered. Lori then moves to Rexburg, Idaho, and everybody else around them, just about all their obstacles are taken out. Oh my goodness. So they said November 26th of 2019, there was this welfare check in Rexburg, Idaho. November 26th or 7th, Chad and Lori leave. So there's a welfare check and then I pack our bags, we're going. June 9th of 2020, Tylee and JJ's remains were found on Chad's property. If you've never heard that call, because he makes a call to Lori when she's in jail about that, like they're searching the property and like, what? Like where? Like the house? No, the backyard. You can just hear them talking. That was, you could hear. Very revealing as well. He's like, oh crap, I'm just in the car and they're looking in the back. Okay, then you see, he skipped to chapter 9. So the defendant stands before you today, charged with multiple crimes. 2 dead children buried in this defendant's backyard. The next month, his wife dead in their bed. 17 days later, this defendant marries Lori Vallow. See, it came full circle. From the beginning, coming back to this, reminding them again, 2 dead children buried in his backyard, the gravedigger's backyard, and right after his wife died, was murdered, marries Lori Vallow. He said, we will ask you to end this horrible narrative. Your verdict will be the link that writes the final chapter for this tragic saga. A chapter that delivers justice for Tammy, justice for JJ, and justice for Tylee. I like how he said the word justice before each victim's name, because if you say justice for Tammy, JJ, and Tylee, it might not have the same impact as justice for Tammy, justice for JJ, and justice for Tylee. That just reminds everyone, yeah, there's 3 victims here. 2 children, 1 wife. I mean, Chad was married to Tammy for 29 years. It's still, I've never seen a betrayal like that. And we've seen many cases, of betrayal, people poisoning their partners and all sorts of things, plotting to murder them or have a hitman after them, all of that. But this, to allegedly do it oneself, and the way it was done and for what, it's just so shocking. Okay, so then it was time for the defense's opening statements. John Pryor, the only defense attorney that Chad has, delivered the statements, and it was about 19 minutes long. He introduced himself. He said, at my age, video presentations are not something that come easy to me. He told the juror not to be distracted by speculation. He also said not hunches and assumptions. He said it all comes down to facts and evidence. He talked about Chad Daybell's missionary work. If you didn't know anything about that, we did a live stream recently. It's on the playlist. It's linked below for you, where we went over Chad Daybell's entire history, like where he was born, how many siblings he had, who his parents are, the missionary work that he did, and, the book writing business that he got into and all of that. So go check that out if you didn't. But the attorney spoke about Chad's missionary work and then his relationship with Tammy. He said they had an extended engagement, which was 6 months, which... Is that extended? I don't think so. 6 months. I think they got married pretty quickly, but extended engagement 6 months before they got married. Okay. Chad Daybell's publishing company, he also talked about that, but he said it was predominantly run by Tammy. So he's trying to distance his client from those books that he wrote and the selling of the books and all that, which I don't think worked very well. But anyway, they said, let me know what you think as well. It's just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion. He said, Chad wrote about his premonitions, good and evil, dark and light. So again, he's just minimizing, the shocking content that's in those books and actually shifting blame. This is where they throw Lori and her brother right under the bus. And I say they being obviously Chad Daybell, who's still married to Lori. Okay. So here it's just like, no, go for it. Throw Lori right under the bus. So basically, he says Tammy predominantly ran the publishing company. Chad was just, writing about his premonitions like anyone would. But good and evil, dark and light. But people aren't making zombie charts and telling others that they need to die if they are dark, according to them. All right. So Chad was trying to sell his books at seminars. They said that's how he made his income. So he was just sitting there basically like a good boy, just selling his books. And then this... I hate to say these words, honestly. We said it again yesterday, but he said this beautifully stunning woman named Lori Vallow comes up and she starts giving him a lot of attention. And she pursued him. Now, it's very difficult, to call Lori Vallow Daybell beautifully stunning. Oh, no. Especially, of course, there's just no criminal that's beautiful or stunning. Okay, killers, not beautiful or stunning. I don't care how they look. They're so ugly on the inside that I just can't imagine using words like that to describe them, right? He could have just said this attractive woman, but I guess he's trying to defend his client. Obviously, he's going to say this beautiful, basically goddess, glowing, blonde woman. Okay, he said named Lori Vallow comes up and she starts giving him a lot of attention. She pursued him. So he's showing her intent. And then he cleverly goes into all her relationships, all her marriages, and just one after the other, showing her patterns, right? So that he can start shifting the blame onto her. He said she then at that seminar helped him to sell some of his books. So she did do something very dominant. She walked up to him. She'd already read some of his books. She spoke to him. I'm sure her eyes were twinkling and he was just like, wow. I mean, she would know how to manipulate based on everything we know about her. And what effect she would have on someone like Chad, right? And then she actually went to the other side of the table and sat down next to him and started helping him sell his books. I mean, that is so inappropriate, right? He's a married man selling his religious books and she's just like swooping in like, I am now going to charm literally the pants off this man. Oh my goodness. Okay, so a length of time after the seminar, there was no contact between the two of them, is what John Pryor said. But then he says a month and a half, 2 months. Okay, but that wasn't very long. Okay. Then he talks about, Chad didn't have any criminal records or anything. There's no real red flags in his past. Besides, it doesn't mean everyone digging graves is a red flag. I'm just saying besides him digging graves for 20 years and then his near-death experiences and thinking he's very, very special and basically the voice of God, that's a bit of a red flag when you look at that. So they said, though, he had a speeding ticket in 2005. We see many suspects like that, like Richard Allen, speeding tickets, Koberger, speeding tickets. So they don't all have, criminal backgrounds. These are all suspects, innocent or proven guilty at the time of this recording. So they say speeding ticket in 2005, but Lori Vallow was a different story. She had very short-lived marriages. And then he points out the following. that Alex Cox would do anything and everything to protect, aid, and assist Lori Vallow. And I do think that's true. Also, did you know that Alex Cox was married for about a year? And I think it was in 1992, if I'm not mistaken. Quite a while ago. He was married for a short time. And that ex-wife said that the reason that she divorced him was because of just how inappropriate him and Lori were. That they would be like simulating sex acts with each other, and they were just strange. She was just like, I want out of this. It's making me very uncomfortable. So I do think that Lori had Alex Cox wrapped around her finger. I think he really would do anything and everything for her. Now, husband number 3 was Joseph Ryan. Alex apparently tased him, based on, of course, what Lori was telling him about Joseph Ryan. Alex was actually put in jail, and if you've ever watched my coverage on this case before, we looked at his comedy show before. Alex Cox basically wanted to be a stand-up comedian at one stage, and yeah, those jokes were not very funny, but he talked about that, okay, going to jail, and he says Chad Daybell didn't even know that Lori existed, so he's showing Lori's behavior before she even met Chad, and I do think that does hold some weight. I do think that Lori is far darker than Chad. I think that Chad is pretty, I don't know how to word it. I don't know what way to look, like somber, stoic. I'm not finding the right words, but Lori, I think she's very dangerous. So I'm not minimizing that Chad's dangerous. I just think that Lori is more controlling, manipulative, and dangerous than one could ever really imagine, right? Although we learned a lot in the trial. Hopefully now we can imagine it, right? So they said that Chad Daybell didn't even know Lori existed, and then in 2019, Alex shoots Charles Vallow, which he did. Lori wanted to get rid of him. There were ugly texts between Lori and Charles was so onto her, saying he knew that she was having an affair. He was then going to email Tammy Daybell, and he did. There's over 1,000-page document in this case, and there's so much in there. There's emails, text messages, letters, and things like that. We've gone over some of it before, but definitely never all of it. So if you ever want me to just, I don't know, go over some of that, I might add it into some of these episodes that I do as recaps, because they're going to bring up some things in the trial, and then again, we can see it with our own eyes, right? So because that projector screen in the court, yeah, no, we can't see much on there. So they said 29 years of marriage. Chad with no discernible issues in his life, and then Lori Vallow comes into the picture. I mean, it does seem like that, right? He's just living his life, 29 years married, 5 kids. I think at the time he was a little bit bored. He was looking to spice up his life. And wow, did somebody come in there and spice up his life? Damn, Lori. Again, I'm not putting all the full blame on Lori. I think they are both to blame, in my opinion. I just think that Lori is very influential, manipulative, controlling, all the things I already said. So he says again, a beautiful, vivacious woman, a very sexual person, and very manipulative. Yeah, she comes into his life and does all that. So he said, yes. Now this was interesting when he says, yes, there was a murder. Yes, there was a burial. I don't know why he said that, because we already know there's 3 murders. Okay, and 2 children were buried in his backyard. And Tammy died in their bed, as in Chad and Tammy's bed. And then she was buried, and then her body was exhumed, and then they deemed her death a homicide. So I don't know why he says that, maybe it's a tactic. There was a murder. There was a burial. There was more than one, sir. Okay, then he says, the backyard of Chad Daybell. Well, we have a 4.5-acre farm in Fremont County, Idaho. And then he talks about JJ's remains being found in the pasture and not in the backyard. So what he's trying to imply there is creating reasonable doubt, of course, that Alex could have accessed the property, to bury the children there. I still think the grave digger did it, in my opinion. But let's see. Now, he then said there will be 4 experts testifying for the defense. In Lori's trial, there were no witnesses. I know everyone's asking, will Chad take the stand? We never know. They always ask them later, are you going to take the stand? And I would guess at this point he's not going to. Let me know what your guess is. So the 4 experts, Dr. Greg Hampican, a DNA expert who got Amanda Knox exonerated in Italy because of DNA evidence, which, by the way, there's a trial happening for her right now in Italy in absentia, so she's not present, but they're still going on. Italy's still busy with it, okay? They say he's also going to say that there was no DNA evidence, no hair sample of Chad Daybell on Tylee Ryan or on J.J. Vallow. Well, there wasn't much left of Tylee Ryan. On J.J. Vallow, I wonder. So whose DNA was on it then? That's going to be interesting. They're going to talk about that. Then they're going to have Dr. Raven, a forensic pathologist, who will say that there's no indication that Tammy's death was a homicide. Now, I do think it's going to be interesting hearing from Dr. Raven, and of course hearing from the state's witnesses, because of course if Tammy's death was originally ruled that she died from natural causes, there's a lot of evidence that would have been lost then, right? Transporting her body, burying her, and everything without considering that this could have been a homicide at the time. Patrick Eller will also testify, a data forensic examiner. Alex, is going to say that Alex visited the property multiple times. So you can see what he was trying to say earlier. Then Dr. Eric Bartelink, a forensic pathologist. It's interesting that he mentions the 4 experts' names, almost so that the jury can keep in mind, well, just wait till you hear from these guys. Here's their names. These are the experts you're going to hear from. Almost like, sure, the state will now present the case, but I'm going to be bringing these experts. It's quite clever. Then 3 to 4 of Chad's children were testified. Chad had 5 children with Tammy. And he said they're going to talk about their mother's health struggle. They're going to talk about their mother's use of various medical treatments she would use. Oil she would put in her leg. Do you mean like arnica oil, sir? Talking about like essential oil. I mean, oil she would put on her leg, medicine and different herbs she would take, like vitamins. And that their mother was suffering from a number of maladies and she would refuse to see a doctor. She was training for a marathon, so I don't know if I believe any of that. Let me know what you think. I know I keep saying that, but I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. That is actually the summary of the opening statements from the state and from the defense. That was pretty much the end of it. The defense then just said, of course he wants them to find Chad, the jury, to find Chad not guilty. The state said, we'd like to find him guilty and end this horrible narrative. And that was the end of it. It was pretty quick. And then, of course, they had their first witness, which I can either summarize at a later stage, or, you know what I would recommend, if my summaries are not sufficient for you, because I'm not going to summarize every single witness and every single thing about the trial, I'm going to summarize as much as I can, especially when there's differences between Lori's trial and Chad Daybell's trial, or if there's new information or something we learn, right? Then I will definitely let you know, either through YouTube Shorts or videos or live streams or on the community tab or whatever it is. I'll keep you posted. But if you want daily recap summaries, what people look like in the court, like how did the jury perceive it, what happened, the behind the scenes, Nate Eaton on East Idaho News is the best source for that. He's in the courtroom every day. He does a recap at lunchtime. He does a recap in the evening. And I learn a lot of information from him as well. So go and check out East Idaho News. I will link it below for you if you've never seen it. They also have articles where they summarize pretty much in bullet points every single day what happens. And Nate Eaton is actually busy tweeting out, we now say posting on X, right? He's posting on X an entire line-by-line summary of what's happening in the courtroom, which is brilliant too. So I can't really top that because I'm not in the courtroom and we're watching this with terrible audio, shame, and like a Zoom camera view, which isn't ideal. I like it when judges are like, you know what, I'm going to take control of the cameras. That's one thing. But the other thing is that, oh no, now you don't have like a camera crew. It's not like professionally done. We can't see the witness properly, but I'm just glad. As I'll say, don't take it wrong. I'm not ungrateful. I'm very grateful that we can see this trial. I think we all just wish that it was better audio, maybe even better visuals, so that we could see the projector screen and things like that too. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this useful, especially if you didn't watch the opening statements. with us. I'll link it below as well if you do want to see the live stream replay of that. And I will see you again soon. Let's see what the rest of the week brings. I'm sure there'll be very interesting testimonies. Some of it, of course, will be a repeat of information because these trials were supposed to happen together. So there's going to be a lot of the same witnesses, a lot of the same information. But I'm sure here and there we're going to be like, what did they just say? Like new information. So we'll look out for that. Thank you so much. And I'll see you again very soon. Stay safe.